welcome back everyone to another episode of the PavPod. Today I get to speak with a special guest. They're all special guests, but today's special guest is a friend of mine's mom, who also is now my friend, Vicki Moretti. She is a former vice president of Legal Aid Ontario. She's on the board of a bunch of different non-for-profits. She is in retirement. She's retired now. She speaks Italian with a heritage of being Japanese. She's got a beautiful family, beautiful house. And it was a lovely conversation. We talked a lot about what it takes to be a vice president, what the day-to-day looks like, her path and how she got there, as well as the nonprofits that she is working for and what she does now with them. So it's a good episode. If you're into nonprofits, it's a good episode overall of her story and how she got to where she is. So sit back and enjoy. And if you like it at any point, hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. And I'll appreciate you guys more and more the more you do it. So yeah, let's jump into it. Vicki, how did you start off with your journey into becoming where you are today? I mean, I know you're retired and you're sitting on a couple boards, but I'm always curious to see how people at cocktail parties describe themselves and kind of their journey.
Well, this would be more of an explanation than a cocktail explanation, because I think really if you really want to get the full essence of where I landed, well, then I've got to sort of speak from the beginning. And really, when I think about who I am today, it was really the sum of all of those choices I made, the sum of all of those decisions I made, and the sum of all of those experiences I had. So I think it sort of all, when I think about it, it all starts when Sam and I, my husband Sam and I, we met very early on. So I was in my teens when I met Sam, and we started dating. And by the time we were 18, we knew we wanted to marry. And that wasn't unusual, because in that generation, everybody was getting married before they were 20. Whoa. Yeah, exactly. At the time, I didn't have the aspirations to go on to university. The plan was, get married, buy the house, have kids, and that meant finding a job real quick. So I started off going to Shaw College, which is a legal secretarial school, and I became a legal secretary. And I did that for a year, and then it occurred to me I was doing a lot of my lawyer's work, right? So I would be drafting all the letters, I would be looking at all the processing times, I would be pretty much running his practice. And I thought, okay, I'm getting, at the time it was $120 a week versus
week?
Well, we're talking many years ago. We're talking 1977, okay? And I basically thought to myself, I've got to do more than this. So Sam and I, we made the decision that we would put off buying the house, we would put off having the kids. And I went to university. So I completed an undergrad degree, then I went on to law school. So that was really sort of some of the bigger decisions. But again, you could sort of see the choices and the detours that you have early on, right? You experience it, you think, nah, not for me. So at law school, I had the experience of working during the summers as an immigration officer at Pearson International Airport. Whoa. Which was the best job ever.
Why?
Right? Really, for a summer. Because you met people from all over the world who were coming to Canada, and you were interviewing people from all over the world. So we would interview anyone who came from celebrities, because we had to process their employment authorizations. Now, the senior immigration officers, they got to deal with all the higher profile celebrities. Like, so when Grateful Dead came, they got to deal with all of the lead singers, whereas when Tony Randall came, it was like a more minor celebrity at the time. We got to deal with Tony Randall. So we got to deal with all of these different celebrities, and we dealt with refugees, and we helped refugees settle. And it was interesting, because never in my wildest dreams would I think, when you go to law school, you have different expectations and you have different ideas of where you may land. And at the time I was thinking, I want to make money. I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to make money and I'm going to go into corporate law, right? Little did I know that my experiences at immigration as an immigration officer, as a summer student, would influence me later on in life. So you set off, you graduate from law school, you think, okay, at the time I had a child during bar admission. So I wanted to find a practice that was close to home. So I went into general practice work, where really you feel like a jack of all trades, but really master of nothing, right? You're touching anything that walks through the door, right? doing a lot of real estate, doing a lot of estates. I even dealt with a woman who was complaining about smelly ice cubes from her brand new refrigerator. So I sent a demand letter for her, in regards to that. And at the end of the day, I was really not that satisfied because, again, you deal with everything that walks through the door, whether or not it's something you're interested in or not. And I was lucky because I had one of my clients come up to me and say, you know what? He worked for a Central Guarantee Trust, a trust company at the time. And he said, we have an opening for general counsel. Would you be interested in applying? So I applied and I landed downtown, which was also it was a new experience because I was dealing with estates, trust agreements. At the time, we were at First Canadian Place. I watched the Sky Dome being built. It was like just it was nice being downtown, but at the same time, after a couple of years, you know in your heart, this isn't really what I want to do. This isn't for me. And while I was working in Central Guarantee Trust, I got a call from Immigration Canada because they still had my file as a assistant immigration officer during my law school days. And they said, we have adjudication positions opened up. Would you be interested in applying? And it was like, hell yes. So I applied for that job. And in that job, another great experience. Everything you say is recorded verbatim.
Whoa.
Every single word you say in a proceeding is recorded. There are transcripts that come out of every single session. And there I was dealing with admissions, so people who wanted to come to Canada who didn't have status, the people who came to Canada who were deemed ineligible because either they had serious criminality records in their homelands, or there were accusations or allegations that they were involved in terrorism.
Whoa.
I dealt with people who were claiming persecution from their homelands. They were claiming refugee status, so we dealt with credible basis tests for the refugee claims.
What does that look like? How do you dive into that?
Well, everyone is represented by counsel, so they present documents that substantiate their claims. So if they're saying, I was persecuted in Afghanistan by virtue of my religion, then they present some evidence of, number one, do you have evidence of your affiliations? Do you have police reports of anything that might have happened to you? Do you have medical records of anything that might have happened to you? So we dealt with, I would say that was pretty much the mainstream, was dealing with refugee claims. But we also dealt with a lot of deportation issues. So, and with landed immigrants, so actually, they were very compelling cases. So you would have a landed immigrant whose parents never saw to it that this young child somewhere during the course of their life would become a Canadian citizen.
What?
So if you are not a Canadian citizen, no matter how long you've been in Canada, you could be the subject of a deportation order.
Whoa.
So if you are convicted of several criminal offenses, and they don't even necessarily have to be serious criminal offenses like murder or anything. So if you have more than one left over, you could be eligible for deportation.
At the age of 16 or whatever.
Or at the age of 20, or at the age of 30. Wow. We had people who were in their 40s who had lived their entire lives in Canada who were subject to deportation. So we would handle those I would handle those deportation hearings. Wow. So it was an incredible job. It exposed me to a lot of cases, but more importantly, it really taught me really important life skills. It taught me, how to listen. It taught me how to, communicate. It taught me how to be more analytical in my approach, and really to ensure that I had that reasonable basis of, before I would say something. It really taught me how to be careful. Right?
Interesting. Okay, I like that you use that careful.
Yeah. Because, and especially since everything was recorded, you really want to. You want to make sure, and everything you do is subject to judicial review at higher level courts. So if I made a mistake, that decision was reviewable.
And did you make mistakes?
I'm happy to say that in the 3 years that I did adjudication, while there were many judicial review applications that were brought against my decisions, not one of them proceeded.
Whoa.
So they were all determined to be valid in
Wow.
law.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what prep work does that look like to get to be careful? Because I'm my position is in sales, and so I can make a few mistakes here and there. But I think, yeah, in your realm, it's not.
Well, you do. I think we all make mistakes, but I think what you have to do is I think you have to be. I think you have to be. Number one, I think you have to really consider what's before you. So you've got evidence that's before you, and if you're not in a position to come out with a decision like that, well, then you stop it. You basically say, you know what? There's a lot of evidence here. I have to think about this. So I'm going to adjourn the proceeding, and then you come back. And then during that time of adjournment, you get to consider all of the evidence that's presented. You get to look at the legislation. You get to analyze the legislation as to how it relates to your facts. And then you have time to actually write a decision or to formulate a decision in your own mind before you go back onto the bench and you start talking about it. But it did take a lot of practice. It took a lot of prep. And you've got to be disciplined in your approach.
You got to want it.
Yeah, and you've got to want it. So when I think about so you're probably thinking, well, how did you end up at Legal Aid Ontario after all of this? So,
yeah.
So what happened then was we would have lawyers who came in to present their clients' cases before us, and one of the lawyers presenting their cases was Lauren Moldman, who was a very high-profile immigration lawyer, probably one of the best in the country, to be honest with you. And he approached me at the end and he said, look, I'm doing this, I'm doing a training session for lawyers to present to immigration tribunals. Would you consider being on the panel to help us train these lawyers? And I thought, yes, absolutely, because it makes a huge difference when I have someone who's effective and efficient and competent as opposed to someone who doesn't know their way around a tribunal. So yeah, absolutely. So I spoke to my directorate and they agreed that I would be a good person to work with Legal Aid Ontario in training lawyers. So having done that, I then became acquainted with officials and administrators from Legal Aid Ontario. And when a position opened up, they gave me a call and they said, we've got this position. We want you to basically run our immigration, refugee, and administrative law tribunal area. And I said, yeah, sure, okay, that'd be a nice change, actually. I got to tell you, after being on the bench after a while, you start getting almost sort of a jaded feel. Yeah, I know you do, because it's like the same allegations come up, you hear the same stories all the time, and especially when it comes down to detention issues. And those detention issues were starting to come.
What is a detention issue?
Okay, so a detention issue is when immigration officials are concerned that a person will not report for the proceeding or will not report for removal. So we have the power of detention. We can detain that person for two reasons. It's either that the person will not report for removal or for the proceedings, or alternatively, that person will not report, or alternatively, that person might go underground, or that person, they're also concerned about further criminality if there's...
This is for deportation or?
Well, for any proceeding. Any
okay.
proceeding, there's always the detention order. There's
Gotcha.
always the potential of that, especially if things don't go well for the client. So if we've decided that, no, you're inadmissible to Canada and we're going to end up deporting you, then the question is, well, will you report for removal?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then you start thinking about some of these deportation and detention orders, and after a while, you almost get kind of jaded in your approach, because you have these cases come before you almost daily, and you almost feel like it was almost feeling like like it was like these, the decisions almost came too easy to me, to be honest with you. And I almost felt almost kind of robotic going through the motions of hearing some of these issues.
Okay.
And I thought, you know what? Now's the time to probably leave this area and do something else.
Was this similar to how you felt in corporate?
Well, okay.
I'm curious with the corporate why you left. Was it that?
Well, it really wasn't me. I didn't find it very interesting, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't. Yeah. It's just, it's a lot
The
of
refrigerator situation wasn't.
no, exactly. So when I went to so anyways, it was a good time for me to move on to Legal Aid Ontario, and it was a good thing that I did because the exposure I had at Legal Aid Ontario was incredible. They gave me a lot of growth opportunities. So they started exposing me to areas of criminal law, which was fantastic because I ended up running an area office that was close to Metro West Detention Center, so that fell within my mandate. And I was working with top-notch criminal lawyers in looking at criminal defenses for murders, conspiracies, guns and gangs.
Conspiracies, what's that?
Well,
UFOs?
conspiracies, like no big conspiracies, like conspiracies to bring in large quantities of drugs, conspiracies to traffic large quantities of arms, just different conspiracies, right?
Okay, I'm not familiar with all the legal terms, but that's interesting. Okay, yeah.
So, and there were, big cases like guns and gangs where they would have a roundup of maybe 30 people that they were under arrest, right? So these cases were very expensive cases. So we had to basically look at what is the defense, what is your strategy, and more importantly, it's how can we keep a reasonable budget to this, right? So we would sit down and I would carve out a budget and I'd work with the lawyers. And so it was like great work, right? Great work. And they also exposed me when you run an area office. Again, you have to look at how can we do things more effectively because we are running off the public purse. So how can I ensure that public dollars are well spent? So I ended up doing a lot of settlement conferences and family law cases.
Oh.
So custody access, property division.
Oh.
Yeah, support. They were all sort of issues that we dealt with. And again, all sorts of really interesting cases there, Yeah.
Was that the fun of it? Because it's not just one aspect like corporate law. You get to touch a bunch of different situations.
Well, it's a bunch. Yeah, I think so. I think there's that. There is, and you're dealing with human life stories as opposed to you're dealing with paper,
refrigerator and dollars. Yeah.
Well, and finances, and and trust agreements.
Sure, which is important, of course, but
it's all very important, but not my thing.
Gotcha.
Right? So I consider myself lucky because Legal Aid Ontario also gave you those opportunities to grow in terms of executive leadership positions. So, I was given the opportunity not only to run an area office, but then later I was called in to take over an acting VP position, which ended up being a VP position. And I oversaw all the GTA cases for family, immigration, criminal, and poverty law. So in addition to working with private bar lawyers who provided these services, we also looked at ways that we could, create a more effective legal aid system by looking at different service delivery models. So, and so that whole component of it was actually really.
And that was way more exciting than.
Well, it was more exciting. It was always moving and always changing. You've got to think as a publicly funded organization, with every new government that comes in, you're going to have either more money thrown at you or less money thrown at you. And when you have more money thrown out, was like, how are we going to spend this in an effective way? Let's create family law service centers, right? Let's do this, let's do that. When your budget's cut, it's like, oh my God, how do we provide all these services but with less money?
Yeah.
Right? And but at the time I became a VP, there were a lot of really significant substantive changes in the way we did service delivery because at area offices, we used to have people come in to make legal aid applications, and we'd have an application officer sit down with the person and interview that person, take notes, and then we'd decide whether we'd give coverage. Well, that all became digitized, and it became a call-in service and with online applications, which meant that we had area offices that were no longer needed. We had people doing jobs that were no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So at the time I became vice president, it meant that we were looking at, pretty serious staff reductions and closure of offices and training people to do their job a whole lot differently. So it was a very anxious time. But at the same time, it was quite rewarding because you actually saw, you could sort of see through some of these transitional models how we sort of developed. And it's like, you know what, this was the way to go. I mean, we all can be so stuck in our ways. And I think it's like it was through trial and experience, you just sort of see different ways or different approaches. So that's how I ended up at Legal Aid Ontario.
And I don't think we should tell the audience because I don't think everyone might know how would you define what Legal Aid Ontario does?
Okay, so Legal Aid Ontario basically provides legal services either through a certificate program, so you can hire your own private lawyer, or through a staff model. We have staff model offices. We have the Refugee Law Office. We have Family Law Service Centers. We have Criminal Law Service Centers, and we have a Duty Counsel program. So if you qualify for free legal aid, so if your income level is within our financial eligibility criteria, you can have a legal aid certificate and you can have that representation and provide a full defense, or you can have that certificate to help you out with your family law matter, whatever the case may be. They also cover, under their umbrella, they also have poverty law services, which are your community legal clinics. So during the time, I oversaw 17 of those community legal clinics, as well as 5 ethno-linguistic and specialty clinics, right? And what they do is those independent legal clinics, they provide services for things like landlord-tenant. Like if you're cut off from social assistance, well, then you can get help at a community legal clinic to get your social assistance back on track. But they deal with those, or CPP, same thing, but they deal with some of those income maintenance issues, landlord-tenant issues, maybe some WSIB, workers' compensation issues.
Yeah.
So if you qualify, again, everything is subject to a financial eligibility test because we cannot provide full coverage. And if you have the means to provide your own legal services, then you should be paying, right?
Well, that's good.
So it's a public service for eligible low-income Ontarians. What we find with low-income Ontarians is that many of our clients have many challenges. And you almost have to provide that more integrated wraparound approach to the way you service some of these clients. So for example, you get a client who comes in and they've got a criminal defense issue, right? And if they're in custody awaiting trial, well, their landlord might evict them. And, and so it's like, how do we maintain that person's home when they're only, right, at this point, they're still innocent. It's only an allegation of guilt, right? So we have to look at ways where we can actually provide that fulsome, integrated approach. When you have some women who I can't tell you the number of times we had a domestic violence victim come into our office, and lo and behold, the reason why she stayed in that abusive relationship was because she didn't have immigration status. Well, how do we correct that? How do we make that right for that person? So it's interesting to see how, it's a different area of law. And then I can tell you, many, many, many of our clients have mental health issues, right? They're low income individuals who can, have a hard time coping with life and with work and with
job and family,
with jobs and everything else. So that's what Legal Aid Ontario does.
Oh, I love that.
It was a wonderful organization, and yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so you said that's how you got to
Legal
Aid Ontario,
and then I worked at Legal Aid Ontario for 28 years. The time flew by. I knew that was my calling. I felt right. It felt practical. It felt, but it just felt right for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then after that, where did life take you?
Well, so I guess in 2018, at the end of 2018, I retired. In 2019, I was in full retirement mode, and so we did some trips. Sam and we went to France and we went to Japan, which was an awesome trip. Yeah. Awesome. I love Japan. Would go back in a heartbeat. I love France too, though. Yeah. And then the pandemic hit, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I did join after my retirement. I thought it was time for some giving back. I always considered myself to be a public servant working for Legal Aid Ontario. So I joined 3 boards.
Whoa.
So the Rexdale Community Legal Clinic, Hospice Vaughan, and the Veritas Foundation.
And what are the goals for all three of those?
Well, Rexdale Community Legal Clinic is they provide low-income Ontarians with poverty law services, so landlord-tenant. They do some immigration, workers' compensation, CPP, a lot of ODSP
What's
and
ODSP?
Ontario Disability Support Payments, and as well as Ontario Works. So clients who were denied coverage under ODSP or who were denied coverage on Ontario Works, then they assist that client in terms of getting medical proof to show that they qualify for those benefits.
Mm.
So I was involved as chair, so I chaired that organization, that board, and they did a pretty significant work for the community.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it. Hospice Vaughan, so it's the first hospice in the city of Vaughan. At the time I joined, we were a community program, and we did a capital campaign, and we've opened up a 12-bed facility, state of the art.
Wow.
Incredible. And it basically provides those persons who have end-of-life conditions that they can spend their remaining days in a place that provides them with health care, security, both emotionally and spiritually, and it's just a wonderful place. And the thing that got me interested in Hospice Vaughan was that my father passed away in a hospice in BC, and he had outstanding care, and at hospices, we invite families and friends to come in and spend as much time for whatever time that person has remaining, and we also provide caregiver support.
Nice, yeah.
So it's really wonderful.
That's good, yeah.
And Veritas Foundation is a foundation that basically it provides support to develop legacy funds for donors, and we basically have a rating service for nonprofit agencies, and we help inform some of the donors in terms of who they would like to donate to. We also manage their funds so that if someone deposits monies with Veritas, we help them in growing that donation so that it could be an ongoing legacy.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome. Oh, cool.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
I've heard this, I feel so silly, but I've heard so many people say, I'm on the board of this, I'm on the board of that. What does being on the board mean? What does that do for you? What does the day in the life of being on the board look like and chair? I have a general idea, but
it's all in what you want to make it.
Interesting.
So I could tell you with the Rexdale board, as chair, I was very active. So I dealt with issues of governance. So governance is basically the structure of the organization to ensure that the mandate is met of the organization. So we basically provide the vision, the values, the mission.
Okay. Yeah.
So we formulate that on, I would say, usually every 3 years, we might want to look at that mission to see whether or not it's still relevant. At the time I'm at Rexdale, we were involved. There was new legislation that dealt with, so it's basically the Not-for-Profit Act for Ontario. So the government passed this legislation, which basically said your bylaws have to be now compliant with this new legislation. So it forced us to basically review our bylaws to ensure that they were now compliant.
Okay.
Again, it all sort of depends. Hospice Vaughan, I am more active than any other organization, to be honest with you. I think some boards require a more operational approach. So we were lacking in HR support. We were lacking in legal support. We were lacking in
all three of them, or just
well,
Hospice Vaughan?
Well, Hospice Vaughan. So Hospice Vaughan, I was chair of the governance committee. I'm now chair of the quality and standard of care committee, and I'm on the HR committee. So I do commit quite a bit of time. I would say typically, again, it's what you want to make of it. Sure. One thing is to go to board meetings on a monthly basis. You review materials and you basically approve the basically how the organization is proceeding. So an executive, you're basically ensuring the boards are there to ensure that the operations are running, so that at the end of the day, you're going to meet your mission or your
okay.
goal.
Okay, and that would be for you publicly and privately traded companies as well.
Well, I only get involved with nonprofits because
course.
I believe in the
Of course,
nonprofit bar.
I just hear a lot of this
yeah.
person's chairing this, and then they tell this president or the CEO what to do, and I always think, oh my gosh,
that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but I think like, my company had the CEO left, great CEO, but he had moved on to something else, and we had someone from the board step in again, another great gentleman.
Yes.
But I never fully understood the structure and the how and the why. Obviously, it's a little different, but I'm just curious. Like, so yeah, you are chairing and you're sitting on a bunch of boards and you're controlling certain aspects of it.
Well, we actually are the guiding mind of the organization. So it's actually the CEO or the president who reports to the board.
Yes.
And the chair is basically the spokesperson for the board.
Okay. Yeah. And so does the board look like a bunch of former employees? Does it look like people who are skilled in certain aspects? How is the board built?
Well, we generally, I could tell you that every single board I'm looking on, we do look at competencies. We want to make sure that we have it's good to have a CPA or an accountant on board because you need someone to act as treasurer and to assist us so far as the monthly financials and year-end financials are concerned. And someone to provide us with that guidance and direction, right? To highlight where are the risks so we do need that type of risk assessment all the time in the financial area. It's always practical to have someone with legal background, on the board, someone who can look out for, is this exposing us to any potential litigation? Do we need to be concerned here? Is there a potential risk there that we need to mitigate? It's always nice to have someone who has HR background because every organization has usually staff, right? Yeah. So if there are HR issues, well, then that person can provide some guidance with regards to human resource issues. Governance is also a big thing because every year there are sort of practical requirements. Do we have enough board members? Do we have enough board members with the skill set we need? Are we ensuring that board members who are coming aboard have the orientation that they need so that they understand the scope and the mandate of this organization? So we try to get well-rounded individuals, and we also need people like, especially at Hospice Vaughan, in healthcare, because we need someone who has an understanding of what quality measure might be. What are the expectations from the Ministry of Health, right?
Yeah.
Are we doing things appropriately? Are there better ways of doing things?
Yeah.
So again, we look for, when we look at composition of board members, we are looking at people who can effectively participate and to provide us with enough input that we can proceed accordingly and we can we can work effectively.
Yeah, with that goal and that mission in mind.
You got it. Yeah, you got
it. That's so interesting. Now, I would assume compensation for a private and public or a nonprofit and a for-profit company board.
Oh, no, this is for free.
No, I was saying, but I would assume, am I correct in the sense that a publicly traded company who makes millions of dollars, the chair gets paid or the board
I would
get
say,
paid?
yeah. Like, my son Jonathan is always telling us that so far as his company, he goes, oh, Mom, we fly in our board members for meetings in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
It's
yes.
It's like, and they do get paid a stipend, which is pretty generous.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know
that. With nonprofit agencies, they don't have the financial means to do so. So
no, of course, nor should they, right? Like you're doing it.
You're doing it for free.
That's amazing. And so, why did you decide to do that after? If you didn't say that already, why after you retire? What made you? Are you a busybody? Are you someone who can't sit still?
Well, I would say, I do like to keep myself somewhat occupied. So after retirement, I found, especially during the pandemic, so I got into Maria Kondo and learned the joy of organization. So I completely organized my house. Like,
I'm sure Sam loved that.
Oh, well, he didn't, because so I would call in, Canada Diabetes for pickup, right?
Okay,
so they would. And I would, because they take donated used clothing and small appliances and all that stuff. And
what is this? What company is this?
Canada Diabetes. So they'll actually come to your home to pick up stuff, which is kind of nice.
Whoa.
Because for the first while, I was dropping off things at Value Village. And it was like, loading up the car.
It's a lot.
And so this just made things so much
Yeah.
easier. So, of course, it's like, Sam would go through everything. It's like, oh, why are you getting rid of this? Why are you getting rid of that? And it's like, no, I'm getting rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So I learned the art and the spirit of sort of downsizing and organizing
Yeah.
and just getting things that didn't spark my joy anymore. It's like, why am I holding on to this, right?
Yeah.
And I've always enjoyed cooking, but I've never really been great at baking. So cooking's easy because you just sort of throw things together, and if
Yes.
it tastes great, it's great. But with baking, there's so much precision involved.
Science.
It is. There's precision, and I'm not really good like that. So I'm trying to bake a little bit more. During retirement now, I've got 2 grandchildren and 1 in the Cayman Islands, so I see that child whenever I can, and I have a darling little baby girl, grandchild, and actually I'm going to be as of Monday, I am actually going to be I'm not going to say full-time, but practically full-time caregiver of Raina.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay, that's exciting. I'm a little jealous. She's a cutie.
Oh,
Yeah.
She's a joy. It's
Yeah.
going to be really, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. I'm curious, you and Sam, started so young. For 2 full questions. How did you know? What was it? Was there some moment? Was there some, if you feel comfortable sharing? I feel like a lot of people, I was talking to my barber on the other episode, and he said he was 21 and he knew. And he said, we didn't get married early on, but he's like, I knew, or whatever age. I want to correct myself if I'm mistaken there. But he said he knew. And I'm always just curious how it's different for everyone. How did you know? Besides his good luck, Sam, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah, but I think it's also, I think there's a level of comfort, right?
Interesting.
And, so I think there's, where there's ease of communication, where there's, and it was funny because we had so much in common, right? We think alike, although I must admit, in your, as the years have gone, we've been married 47 years now,
Wow,
right?
congrats, yeah.
So after 47 years, you start, and you I think as individuals, with lifelong sort of career experiences, you do develop different ideas and but yet I think we've been able to sort of stay in sync. But at the very beginning, I think there was this comfort level, and there was this security in feeling that comfort level, and there was never, I always felt that there was, he always, I've always felt very secure with Sam, and yeah, it just felt right. It feels right.
Yeah. Is there something that you wish you did, or you were more like him in a sense? Like, is there a trait?
No.
No.
No, I like exactly who I am, to be honest with you.
Gotcha.
Although there are things I admire.
Sure.
Obviously, there are things that I admire about him. But at the same time, I think it's important for everyone to be sort of true to themselves, right?
Okay. Do you find he balances you out?
I think we both do. Like
Sure.
I think during certain times I'm especially at those times when you're feeling insecure, it's always nice to have validation.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what you need in a partner, someone who can validate you too, right?
Is that the most important thing?
I don't know if it's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is to feel loved.
Yeah, and secure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's to feel loved, and I
I tend to agree with you. I find, no offense to my past relationships, is passionate, but not always safe and comfortable. And it was always too exciting. And, and my current relationship is very calm and still exciting, but I just feel like you said safe. I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that's the healthier way to go through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I do find she balances me out, though. So that's why I was curious to see if you
that's so sweet.
have that. Yeah, she definitely is better at some things than I am, cooking being one of them. She's Italian, so I don't know if that helps or adds to it. I should be better because I'm Portuguese, but we're not going to jump into that too much. But you started off with Sam, and you knew and you wanted the family, and you got to where you are today. I'm sure there was a lot of struggles and moments where you felt really, like you said, you needed that reassurance from your partner. Is there moments that you feel comfortable sharing where you were in that dark hole, so to speak, and how did you get out of that? I feel like a lot of people...
Well, a couple of things actually. So, okay, I had my first child during bar admission, which
Yeah,
was really not a
crazy.
which was not a great thing to do, to be
Okay,
honest
yeah,
with
hey.
you. I mean, I think about it, but at the time, it just seemed. I thought, well, if we're going to have children, when else are we going to have children? Because um, I guess we could have had the child when I was during undergrad or but it just didn't occur to us to have children. It wasn't until I was 30 years old and I was completed my law degree, and it was like, oh, just wait, am I gonna go to bar ads and then have a child and then go into a career, or am I gonna when am I gonna have this? If we're gonna have children, when are we gonna have this
Yeah,
child?
interesting.
So I ended up having Jonathan the day of my state's exam at bar admission, so I had to miss that exam. And I missed the next exam, which was, I think it was Crim Pro or some criminal procedure. And I ended up having to make up those two exams and write constitutional law within 3 days. It was like insane. I would never recommend
Yeah.
anyone to do that. Like,
But you
bar
pulled it
admission.
off.
But you know what? You power through it.
Okay,
you
that's,
do
yeah.
it. You do it. You
Okay.
just power through it. And it really helped that we had this swing that Jonathan really liked. So it would go, yeah.
I thought you meant
No.
metaphorically speaking.
No,
An actual swing.
No, we actually had the swing, and I
Hilarious.
put Jonathan in it, and and then I could tell you one of the scariest, darkest moments of my life was when the handle on the swing broke, and it was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to finish my bar ads if I can't get this replacement. Where
Yes.
can we get another swing?
Oh my
so we
God.
ended up getting another swing,
course,
and
yeah.
I passed my bar.
Oh, amazing.
And I guess the second part was actually at Legal Aid Ontario when I went into the VP role, because it was at the time of
Interesting.
tremendous transition, and we were closing all these offices, and it was really hard. It was really hard. But again, you power through it. What I found really helpful was you evaluate the skill set of people around you, and you take the people who you know will help you and who will create that team effort to get it done. And that's exactly how we did it. So again, I think a lot of it in both instances, I think what you're looking at is what type of support can you get. So for me, it was the swing. No, I'm kidding. It was Sam. It was Sam in the swing.
Yeah.
But it was also just having the right people around me who could support me and who could get me through those challenges.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Yeah. I'm a big family oriented individual. So I feel like that's kind of part of the answer there. I'm curious, were you always power through? Did you always feel like I'm just going to power through, I'm just going to get it done, and I'm just going to go through it when you had those tough times? There was no, or I'll let you.
I just think at any time, whenever you're taking on any type of work responsibility, you wanna finish it, right?
Okay.
And I think I think that's all part of being diligent and just and just sort of understanding. And I think we all have a responsibility to the people who are writing our paychecks, or people, So I think in some respects, I mean, there were times where I thought I really had to power through because it was either something I didn't really want to do, or it was something that was really hard to do.
But even as a child, were you always like a power through person, or did you become that? I guess is more.
I think I've always been.
Okay.
I think I've always been kind of ambitious in a
Okay.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
No, I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
And I think I've always been quite structured. Like I was that
Okay.
kid who had all of her books in alphabetical order.
Gotcha.
I had everything always sort of put away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of a neat freak.
Okay.
So I
Marie
think.
Kondo.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Like, did I embrace that?
I asked because I've noticed as a kid, I wasn't as organized, right? And school, I love to learn. I love
Yes.
to listen and learn. I don't test well, but I love to listen. And you can ask my friends, I'm very nerdy and like to study. Studying for the sake of learning is so exciting to me. But when it came to being organized as a kid, I was not. But as I get older, my girlfriend, my friends, my job, they joke with me all the time. My OCD is showing. My,
Yeah.
organization is crazy in my mind because certain things have to be a certain way. And so I'm just curious, were you always like that, or did you grow into that?
I'm
That's why
not
I asked that
exactly sure. I
question.
don't actually even know where it started, to be
Yeah,
honest
you were
with
just
you.
where I
It
guess,
just
yeah,
felt natural for me. I've always, I think I've always been quite
yeah.
organized in my
No, that's awesome.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think it's a way of getting things done too,
of
because
course.
if you're not, it's really difficult to get things done if you aren't structured and organized. So I think it's always sort of helped me going to get through. I'm one of these list people. I
Yeah,
write lists for everything.
yeah,
I mean, even preparing for this
of
talk.
course.
So Adam gave me some questions that might be asked during this interview, and it was like, okay, let me put my mind to this. Let me start writing out scripts. Let
Of
me start,
course.
So I've always been that person. I like being prepared. I
Okay.
don't like going into sort of unknown circumstances without
Interesting.
having prepared.
Okay. And
Yeah.
would you say I'm assuming that's helped you in your career?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it also stems back to immigration too, because again, when you're on the bench and everything you say is recorded,
Mm,
you are going to be more analytical. You are going to be more careful in your approach. You are going to start, I mean, you have to listen to people. You have to, you have to give appropriate responses, right? So I think all of that sort of contributed to, basically even my philosophy of, of that preparedness, if that can
yeah.
be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
totally makes sense. I find
Yeah.
myself, yeah, certain things are great when they're spontaneous, but a lot of parts of me
I wish
have to
I
be.
had more spontaneity
You
sometimes.
do?
Yeah, I do. I
Why?
do.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
I don't know. I think it might be more fun.
Okay, fair enough. Do you think it's
Yeah.
a grass always greener kind of situation?
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I
what?
love those people who have that incredible wit who could just sort of talk it. Like there's some people, it's like, whoa,
Yeah, it's
like where did
Sam.
that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he
Yeah.
is. He
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah.
I hit the nail on the head there. I was just taking a shot in the dark. Um, I've noticed a lot of people at my age and younger too have this a bit of imposter syndrome. We talked a little bit about growing and getting these new situations and careers that you've put yourself in and gotten to, which are great. And we talked a little bit before this, off the record or off the recording, of how it kind of just led you there and you were trying things out and exploring. And back to the question is that a lot of people feel that they have imposter syndrome when they get something. They are either spontaneous or they work towards, and they get in this VP position and they feel, oh, maybe I'm not the right material for this position.
Hmm.
Have you dealt with that, and how did you overcome that imposter syndrome?
I don't know. I think from time to time, I think everybody has some insecurities. And, let's face it, I think every position has certain expectations, and you assess yourself as to whether or not you're meeting those expectations. And if you're not, then the insecurity sort of comes in, right? So I think that's a natural thing, especially if you're in a new career or if you're taking on a new job or a new responsibility or you're going into a new relationship. I think there's always going to be some insecurity of the unknown, right? I feel, I think people are being too hard on themselves when they say, I'm an imposter, right? Because I don't think you're giving yourself enough time, right? Like, I think it's time for you to sort of sit back and, yeah, I mean, you're going to evaluate yourself, but I think it's time that's your opportunity to say, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses here, right? And how can I overcome some of my weaknesses, right? Where are the opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Right? So I think that there are things, and and also what are the threats, right? So I hate to say it, I grew up in during my work career, we did a lot of project management where you do that SWOT. That what are my strengths,
Yes.
what are my weaknesses, what are my opportunities, and what are my threats? Well,
Yeah.
that's exactly it, and I think that's something that we should be undertaking, as we are going through each stage of our lives, right? And especially if you're going into a new career, I think that's the perfect time for you to basically sit down. Don't think of yourself as an imposter. Rather, think of yourself as now's the time where I've got to start thinking about what can I really contribute? What can I do great? And and if there is a weakness, how can I overcome that? Can I get a mentor here? Can I, is there a course I need to take? Is there something, is there something I can do to overcome that weakness? I think when people start thinking of themselves as being the imposter, I think they're doing themselves a disservice, to be honest with you. I would never allow that for that to become part of my vocabulary.
Interesting. So you've never felt like getting a position or being in a situation you
Well,
felt.
I think I've always felt some insecurity because
Sure.
it's the unknown,
Yeah.
right? It's the unknown.
Yeah. No, it's scary for people.
It's scary, but you've got to think too, why am I here? There was obviously there was something that someone saw in me to bring me here, right?
That's true. It's funny you say that. As I get older, I've started a new career, and as I get older, I start to become more comfortable with myself.
Yes.
And say, okay, you know what? I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And so I tease about my partner being, she balances me out. She's better at some things. And I talked to Sam, and it was actually funny. He said, oh, Vic is so good at with people and this. And I said, yeah, but you're in sales. Like, you're such a personable guy. I'm talking to you. I see you're talking to all the other people here. He goes, no. She's good with remembering people. I'll go to her and be like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Or who's that person? And she'll be like, this is who he is. This is what he does. This is his wife. This is all this stuff. And, all that to be said, I'm curious, like, when did you become comfortable with yourself? Was there a certain point where you just felt, you know what, I am who I am. There's nothing wrong with who I am. And I say this because that's where I'm starting to feel a little bit of like, you know what, I may not be good at some stuff, but I know what I'm good at. I'm not a bad person, or I'm not an imposter. Is there a moment or an age or
I don't
time?
know whether there's a moment, but I think it's a lot about your experiences. So I can tell you I was born in 1956, and in the 1960s I was in elementary school, and I got to tell you, I was at the time. So when we're talking, how many years ago? When we're talking like 60 years ago, it's that long ago. When we were talking 60 years ago, being a Japanese Canadian, I was probably the only visible minority in my kindergarten to grade 4 class, right? Yeah. So at the time, I was being raised in Scarborough, and we lived in a very, very white community. I think there might have been one other kid who was non-white, right?
Oh, interesting.
And it was funny because did I feel like a minority? Did I feel singled out? No, not really, because I could play marbles as well as any other guy or any other girl, in my class, and you just it's funny. You just sort of I think you sort of evolve. You're evolving. You get new experiences. And then I met Sam, and, in addition to being a Japanese Canadian, well, I also adopted this wonderful Italian culture, right? So I speak Italian now. I make Italian food. And it's weird because, as I was saying to you earlier, I think some people I've taken on this persona of being Italian. I have strangers come up to me speaking to me in Italian, which is kind of weird, right? And what's weird back is like respond to them because I do speak Italian. But I think we're always sort of developing, and I think at the time we stopped developing, and the time we stopped learning things, and the time we stop having that that passion for life is when it's probably over, right?
Yeah. Is there a crazy story you have working with Legal in Ontario that you feel comfortable sharing?
I think there are so many, to be honest with you.
If you guys are enjoying the episode so far, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out with the YouTube algorithm. It'll help me out a ton, and I'll give you a high five when I see you guys in person, if I ever do. Now back to the episode.
I think a lot of them are through our criminal defense. You have all sorts of really interesting cases of people who have committed either a murder. You get exposure to those facts. I think one of the ones there was a case I actually had to recuse myself, and it was one of our neighbors in Richmond Hill. She was killed by she a married woman who was killed by her lover, who was a police officer. So the police officer was charged with her murder. She had gone missing for, I think, almost for a year, and they found her, and he finally turned her. He was going through a marital separation, so the wife wanted to sell the family home, and they found her body it was in a garbage container, sealed and hid behind a wall. So he was one of the clients that we dealt with, but we've dealt with all sorts of different murders, and they're all if you're a fan of any type of docudrama like Forensic Files, or then all of those circumstances, they do happen. Like they're there. Like we've had cases where a guy commits murder he's driving around on his motorcycle with his wife's severed head to move the body, and he's caught, right, with the severed head.
What?
All sorts of cases. So any legal, like most,
cow.
a lot of people who are in custody on a murder charge, they can't afford, because they're in custody. It's not like they're working, right?
Yeah.
So in many circumstances, Legal Aid Ontario will provide a full defense for that person. But yeah, it's interesting work because, again, you get exposure to all of these case scenarios and you think, oh, this is crazy. Like, I mean, when you think about, like, fact and fiction,
Yeah.
well, there isn't, it's like, it's like you can't make up this stuff, okay?
Yeah.
You cannot make up this stuff. In family law, I mediated a case, again, we're talking low-income individuals, they don't have any money, and the issue that came up was who gets the snake. So
What?
the husband had bought a snake for the wife, like a bowl, because she was a stripper.
Okay.
Right.
That's usually correlated, connected somehow.
She wanted the snake, right, for her job, and the husband said, well, no, I gave her the snake, and I like the snake as a pet. So, of course, it was actually one of the cases we couldn't mediate. We couldn't get a settlement for. And, in fact, it's not even a case that you could take to court because children's law, it's not a child.
Yes.
Right? It's not under the Children's Law Reform Act.
You mean we don't have snake rights in this province here?
No. But you try to mediate. You try to. I had another case of mediation where the husband would find old cars and he would blueprint them and fix them up, and he would sell them. And the wife was claiming that the husband had this inventory of expensive cars, and he said, no, they're all pieces of junk. I haven't even started working on them. They're valueless right now.
Okay.
And so anyways, and she was insistent. No. I said, okay, well, we're talking property division. I said, would you be prepared to offer her half of the cars?
Yeah.
And she turned around and said, I don't want that junk, right? So much for mediating a property division issue. Yeah, so it's like those types of cases. But I must admit, there are some cases that really sort of draw on and it's like those cases where you do have a child custody issue, right? Or a child access issue. And, and you really want to work with the families to get something going so that both parents can exercise their parental rights and can have that healthy relationship with their child moving forward.
Yeah, whatever the family unit looks like, right?
Exactly.
Is that the most frustrating part of your job when you were there? Is it frustrating that you're dealing with SBOA?
No, it's actually kind of
rights?
fun. You know what? Yeah, it's kind of fun because it's different, right?
Sure.
And it's like, okay, here we go. Right?
Yeah, of course. Here's another one. Here's a crazy one.
Oh, here we
for
go.
a story for the dinner table tonight at dinner.
Exactly.
But is it the kids? Is it the family? What's the most frustrating part of that job?
I think with any job, there are frustrations with it when things don't go your way, right? But the thing is, I think you just have to take the approach where either you power through it or you basically just... the thing I liked about mediation was we gave the opportunity for the parties to sort of sit down with us and help solution, right? So it's like, okay, so what would work for you? If access is a problem right now, how can we make it work? Do you have any ideas? Let's talk about some ideas. Can we experiment? Can we try something, come back a couple of months from now, and if it works, we can continue or expand it, right? So I think that there are things that we can help people because you don't, especially in family law cases, when it comes to custody and access, you don't end up, like at the end of the day, you were both parents. You were both parents to this child. Yeah. Things have changed. You are no longer living together, right? How do we make this right, right? How do we create those circumstances where where you have two separate households now, where the child can benefit from both of you, right? Yeah. And how can we start working towards that healthy relationship? And if it takes, but don't think at the end of the day it's going to be, custody for me. Like you can't go in with the perspective, I only want custody and custody is all I'm going to get, or I only want full-blown access and that's all I'm going to settle for. Sometimes we have to work towards those things, especially if there is no trust between the parties. Yeah. So then it's, how do we develop trust? How do we set you up for some success here, right? So why don't we try why don't we try some day access? And if day access is okay, why don't we move to overnight access? And if overnight access is okay, why don't we start talking about some expanded time during summer holidays?
Gotcha.
Or like, so let's start building some trust here, folks. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there some, I'm assuming there's a lot of skills you learned being a mediator like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we actually, again, Legal Aid Ontario provided those opportunities. We were all trained on mediation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how to facilitate settlements like that.
Do you
Right?
think that helped you a lot in your career and family life?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
being-
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, especially raising teenage boys.
Can imagine.
It's like,
Got to mediate there.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if you do this for me, what now?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I can imagine that's tough. You know, as someone whose parents were divorced and had to do supervised visits and then slowly overnight and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mind you, I think what was nice was that both parents wanted to be parents and wanted to be involved. So
Exactly.
do you find a lot of it's the trust is the main issue at the
I
table?
do. I do
Okay.
think it's trust, and I think there's always some hurt and some animosity too, if you're going through a separation, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's overcoming some of those emotions and basically focusing where you have to focus, and that's on the child. Like I said, yeah, okay, I get it. You're upset. I get it. You're hurt. I get it that that you may have been mistreated, but really at the end of the day, how was that person as a parent?
Interesting.
Well, really, that's the perspective. And okay, here's our focus. The focus is on the child.
Exactly.
Right?
Not on how they treated you, right?
No,
Yeah.
this isn't about you anymore. This is about the child and how we can get the child to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Is there any crazy cases in that regard with boa constrictors and stuff with the kids, or was it just pretty?
No, I think they were all pretty, I think most of them involved, getting access, and not only that, but managing expectations, right?
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So I think both parties, they come in with sort of preconceived ideas of where they want to be in that child's life, right? And sometimes those are unrealistic. So it's like, okay, they may be, it may be not appropriate right now, but how do we get it? How do we get the circumstances so that we can build ourselves and build that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the most satisfying part of the job?
Oh,
is
it
getting
is.
Okay.
It is. I found it. Yeah.
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 Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get people out of court because really you don't really want to litigate these issues. If you are unable to resolve these issues on your own, if you're unable to, let's face it, these are sort of life skills. Moving forward, you're not going to have a lawyer who's going to deal with every time your access doesn't go well or every time your pickup or drop off isn't the way you expect it to be, right? Like, we're not going to provide you with legal services to that extent, nor would you pay for a lawyer to do that. These are things that you're going to have to start coping with on your own. So, and I think judges and I think courts have an expectation that as parents, you're going to be able to solve some of these issues on your own ultimately, because you're not going to run to court every time something goes wrong on access or custody, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's something serious. If there's something serious, okay, if there's a material change in circumstances, absolutely. But for day to day, you know what? Get your act together. Figure it out. You're grown up, right?
It seems like a lot of parents would be acting like children at that point.
Well, and I think it's not so much acting like children, but they have certain expectations. And I think you've got to manage those expectations and say, right now, that's not going to happen. Let's start building. Let's start building. Your situation so that you can actually start exercising some effective access, or you can start getting, or you can work towards that goal of joint custody if that's going to be. But you're not going to have a joint custody arrangement if the two of you can't talk.
You're almost like a parent.
Yeah.
You're parenting
Oh, yeah,
parents
exactly.
to parent
It's like,
their children.
listen here.
Yeah. I think of that with my mom and dad in that they got divorced and didn't talk. And then it became lawyer to lawyer. Then it became a mediator. Then it became emails. And it became my mom telling me what to tell my dad. And so it got it was much better because we at least able to communicate. And it was very cordial. It wasn't traumatic too much, at least. But it was interesting. It's interesting you say that because I could see that a little bit from my own experiences of like, no, I don't want to do this, and no, we're not doing that. And
well, it's always a challenge too when you have older kids too, because I think there comes a point where, you know what, if you have a 16-year-old child, you can't force a 16-year-old child to see their parent, right?
I guess right.
Well, I mean, there comes a point where it's like, you know what, there are ways that you can start building up that relationship on your own, but no court's going to say, 16-year-old, you got to see your dad or you got to see your mom this weekend, right?
Yeah. Is
Not
there like a
gonna
legal,
happen.
an age cutoff, I
No,
guess?
I don't think,
or-
well, I don't think, but I think it becomes an issue of practicality. Like, you
Ooh,
going to force,
yeah. Yeah, it's easy to force a 2-year-old versus a
yeah,
16-year-old.
exactly. You
Yeah.
know, like, are you going to force, an older child to have a relationship with a parent that child does not want to see, right?
Did,
It's,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think it's, I think it's not, I don't think it's practical. And I think you actually do more damage to your relationship where you're being forceful like that,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's tough.
But there have been, I mean, I've dealt with cases where you have one parent who poisoned the kid against the other parent and, either providing them with, false stories or misrepresentations about that parent as being a horrible person. And, you get kids who are, I wouldn't say, well, maybe brainwashed is the right word, but they do not want to see the other parent because the other parent has poisoned their mind towards that person. And those cases are heartbreaking because I think even courts have a hard time grappling with some of those issues.
Yeah, what do? You can only do so much.
You can only do so much. I mean, there comes a point too, I think courts have tried to find, through contempt orders or through,
Oh.
but at the same time, there comes a point where you've got to start, there's some cases that are just so lost, where the child is just not going to ever, you're never going to have a healthy relationship. And I think there comes a point where you've got to start thinking about the best interests of the child.
Wow. And what does that look like?
They're sad cases. I think
Yeah.
there comes a point where it's like, I mean, you keep on fighting, but is that what you really want to do? And then you end up getting medical assessments because that's what you end up doing. You get psychiatric assessments with regards to the damage or really to what extent is this representing like how there comes a point where you've got to get professionals involved in terms
Or
of
to diagnose the parents?
well, no, to basically provide an assessment for the child. Is this in the best interest of the child? And they look at all the circumstances. They look at, at the family relationships, the interactions with each parent, how well the kid's doing in school. They look at, whether or not to what extent the child has experienced trauma at any point with any one of the parents. So I think it becomes, I think some cases can be really quite extreme, and those cases they're just heartbreaking.
Do you get a lot of people who are very much like anti-government in the sense of you can't tell me how to raise my kid or what to do?
Oh, of course, yeah, of course,
How does that go down?
Well, you know what? And sometimes in those cases, especially if you can't move them or budge them, then it's like, okay, take it to a court, take it to a judge, right? And the judge is basically, they'll just make a pronouncement one way or the other. And that's what I used to warn people too. It's like, you know what, this is your opportunity to really create your own solution rather than having a decision imposed by a judge that may not necessarily work for you, right?
Yeah.
So this is your shot. Let's do it. Let's work at this, right?
That's crazy. Like choosing the wrong person early in life or any point in life to procreate with could lead you down a path where you're sitting at the table hearing this from someone saying like, be wise with your choice the next few moves because
exactly.
That's why I asked early on, like, how did you know? And I guess that comfort and safety.
Well, that's right. And I think that's it. It's got to be a gut feeling, right?
That's crazy. A gut feeling. Do you find a lot of your choices are based on gut? I'm starting to.
Well, they can.
I'm trying to do that, but honestly, it's really hard sometimes for me to
but
sit
you know
and
what's right
trust
and what's
my
not.
gut.
So you evaluate everything,
True.
right? And I think that's what you have to do. You have to evaluate, right? You have
Okay.
to basically analyze your circumstances and evaluate what's important to you,
Okay.
and just go with it, right? There's some point where you just have to go for it, right?
But what about regret? How do you deal with regret in those choices? Do you regret making that mistake, or are you just someone who?
Oh my God! Again, when I think about all my career choices, all the choices I've made throughout my career, when I think about all the detours I made, I think you learn something from all of them, right?
Okay.
So for me, it's like, don't beat yourself up over
Interesting.
anything you've done. There's always a lesson from it, right? I think you have. Otherwise, you'd go crazy thinking. Yeah, I mean, and do we really want to dwell on regret.
Some people do, though.
I know some
right?
people do. I tend to be more positive in my outlook.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. But
But, like, yeah, okay, yeah, are there things I would have wanted to say? Are there things I should have said? Are there things I should have done? Yeah, of course. But are they so substantive that I am going to dwell on these for a time? And am I going to let it down? Or am I just going to rise above it and move on?
yeah, you have
That's
that
the
choice,
choice.
right? That's
Yeah.
on me, right? It's not
Right.
on
And if
the
you want to
world.
be miserable,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Looking back, talking about regret in your family and balancing out, is there something you wish you started doing earlier on in life? Is there something you're like, I wish I'd started this earlier? Would it either make me happier, or would it maybe would have helped me?
You know, you don't know what you don't know until
Sure.
you've done it, right?
Sure. Fair enough.
So for me, I think that when I think about where I've been and where I've gone, I think it was really the sum of all those experiences that brought me. Because had I not, I really out of high school, did I really know what I wanted to do? I thought my life was laid out for me. I thought marriage, family, house, and and find a job that will help support those three ideas right away, right? So for me, it was like, okay, go legal secretarial. That sounds interesting. I think I can do this. You have a fairly good income, right?
Yeah.
So I think had I not gone through, I wouldn't have known what I wanted to do.
Okay. But is there some advice you could give to people, like stretching more, maybe saving earlier? Some people, my grandma worked at the bank, so she said, as soon as you get money, you put it into retirement. And I was like, okay, grandma, it's only $10, so I don't know how much I can put into retirement. But is there some advice you would give to young people to say, hey, start doing this earlier? You're going to thank yourself when you're...
Well, you know what, okay, number one, what I think about, and this, I was talking to Adam about this on the way in, and that is when I think about what type of advice would I give to young people today, number one is, I actually feel really badly for the generation of kids who are just graduating from high school because they get out of grade 12. I mean, they did away with grade 13, which killed me because I thought grade 13 was another year of growth and maturation for kids before they started post-secondary school, right? And so at grade 12, we're basically saying, decide on a career path, right? Because post-secondary education is so expensive right now. If you're going to go to university for 3-4 years, you better know what you want to do, right? And I think that's really unfortunate because I think after grade 12, do you really know what you want to do? And I think about when I think about my life, right? It's hard to fathom what you want to do for the rest of your life. For the next 50 years, you have to decide after grade 12, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of unfortunate. And I was talking to them, I said, number one, I think there are different things that kids can do these days that can help them make an informed decision. Go out, do volunteer work, do volunteer work for different sectors, just so you can get a taste of things, right? Just get a taste of things. If you think you're going to be a banker, see if you can do some even volunteer work at a bank, right? I'll sit at the reception desk, during off hours if I can get some exposure to that, right? So do some volunteer work or try to find part-time jobs in different sectors so that you get some idea of what that sector represents, right? I think, take advantage of opportunities as they come, right? Just go for it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Okay? Like, don't beat yourself up, right? Again, I've gone through so many different career choices. And if I were to beat myself up after every single one of them, I probably would be a mess right now, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, take these as all growth sort of opportunities. At least you get to understand what you like and what you don't like, right?
Yeah.
But I think that again, I just think that there are a lot of things that, when I think about younger generations and the pressures, I think about the affordability of housing. When I think about, the competition and, and finding jobs and when I think of, and the different skill sets that are needed now, I think it's, I do think it's time for, I think, for young people to really expose themselves, just get all those life experiences you can. If, I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to teach English as a second language in Japan. My niece did that for a couple of years. Great experience, right? And at the end of the day, she knew she wanted to become a teacher, right? So, okay, there, great, wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But experience and really just sort of take advantage of some of those opportunities if you can.
Yeah, I find a lot of people now, like resumes and jobs and positions, are looking for experience over education.
Yeah, they
And
are.
some people are saying, especially in the U.S., where school's way more expensive than it is in Canada, at least from what I've heard my colleagues and friends in the U.S. say. That the 4 years are better off spent like volunteering or working. But there's a bit of a stigma we have nowadays, right? Where if you don't go to college, you don't go to school, there's the party scenes as well, that people want to be a part of that culture of going to college and socializing, because maybe you're from a small town where your high school's only 80 people and you've never seen a minority of any color, of any race, So they want to have that experience where they broaden their horizons. So they are stuck in that situation where they have to go to school and be in debt. They don't get to experiment, and their parents are putting pressures on them. I know my parents are kind of immigrants in a way, in the sense that they came to Canada and then they grew up here, but they still kind of that old school mentality of like, you have to go to school. My mom's rule was that you don't have to work, which I did, but if you go to school and to get a degree, not even a diploma or certificate, you have to get a degree. Did not a master's, PhD, just that level was the minimum. And my dad, didn't know anything. He's like, I don't even, is a degree good? Is that important? Like, So I agree with you in that experience is more important, and they should be doing that. But it's a tough one for
It is a
certain
tough one.
people.
Don't get me wrong. I think, you know what, seriously, I would be very upset if neither of my children if either of my children hadn't completed a degree. I think number one, I think post-secondary school provides that opportunity for, for growth and for development. I think it's a good way to socialize. Many of the friendships I have are from university. Many of the associations I have are from university. I think it's incredibly important. And not only that, but you learn a real discipline when you're at university. It's different than high school. So I think it's important for if you have the means to get a post-secondary education. But I also think it's important for you, if you are going to start making decisions about your own career, to get as much exposure as you can in this, at least the sector you believe you want to work in, right? Because you feel badly for those kids who, I had at law school, there were people in my class who went through 3 years of law school, and law school was not easy, right? A lot of hours and studying, and at the end of the day, there were I know one person who said, you know what, I think I want to become, her dad owned a landscaping company. I think I want to do landscaping. Another one became a cabinet maker, and I know someone who became a teacher who went to Quebec and started teaching.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a lot of, I don't know whether, I wouldn't call it wasted effort. You get something out of it, but 3 years of law school, it's like,
It's a tough sell to your parents to say, hey.
Especially now. I mean, Osgoode Hall, I think their tuition's over $30,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's expensive. You can go into huge debt, right? So, again, I think before you embark in graduate school or postgraduate school, I think you really have to be certain that it's, something you want to do, right? It's not just a mind exercise, right?
Yeah. You don't read a book and say, okay, that's
that's interesting, great. You know? Yeah.
So I like the idea of trying it out and volunteering, experiencing. I think it's good to get on your resume. It's good for careers and jobs.
It's great for resumes.
To say, hey, look, I can get paid and I did only this, but at least I have the basic knowledge of this subject or this industry. What would you say is a good length of time to really grasp it? I'm starting a new job and I'm not even 6 months in, and I feel like I'm slowly getting there. But what do you think is a good amount of time to really volunteer and say, hey, I have a full grasp or a good grasp, or is it dependent on the person?
I think it all sort of depends on the person and what their interests are,
Okay.
and that's hard to say.
Okay.
I think we all gravitate towards. I can tell you, I didn't do any volunteer work during my career because I didn't. Well, actually, no, I did. I used to volunteer. I was on the board for the Rexdale Community Legal Clinic while I was an area director in Etobicoke. But when I became VP, it became one of my oversight clinics.
Okay.
So there was a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I couldn't stay on the board. But my job, being a full time VP, was pretty intense. Like my hours they were like 60 hours a week. Yeah. But I think if you have time, it's great. But I wouldn't stress out about doing volunteer work when you're in a career, to be honest with you.
Okay.
If you don't have the time, you don't have the time. If
Yeah.
you can make the time, great. I can tell you when I was an area director, I had the time to do volunteer work. When I became VP, it was crazy. I mean, I actually lived downtown away from home because of my hours. They were so long. Yeah, I couldn't do the commute.
Oh my God. It was
Yeah.
that bad.
So Monday through Thursday in the VP role, I lived downtown. Yeah, Monday through Thursday.
What? So
Hmm.
what would your day look like? What would a day in the life of a VP
Okay.
look like
Well,
on Monday morning?
I would Monday morning I would leave my house in Kleinburg at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would drive down to my condo in Yorkville. I would spend the next, because it was only a half an hour drive at 6 in the morning, I would spend the next hour just getting caught up on some more emails. And I'd take a quick shower and I'd walk to work. And I would stay at work until about 6:37. And this is not taking I was lucky to get a 15-minute break, 15-20 minute break. Yeah, it was that busy. And then I'd come home, I'd have a really quick meal, and then I would work. I'd probably work until about 9 o'clock, go to bed, wake up, and the same thing sort of repeated itself. I'd wake up at
Wow.
6:30 in the morning, I'd do an hour of emails. Then I would get ready for work, go to work, be at work by 8:39 and stay until 6:37. Yeah, but I just found because the commute was so bad,
Yeah.
downtown traffic is horrendous. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some days where it was just, and it was funny because there was a turning point for me because I remember one night I was feeling really, I had a bad cough. I just had a really bad cold, and it was like 8 o'clock at night. I was driving up because I would take the Gardner Expressway to 427 and going up the 427. It was snowing. There was no one on the road. And I was thinking, if I just closed my eyes just for a second, what harm could it do? And then it occurred to me, what am I thinking? Rolled down the windows, snow. And I just thought, I just can't do this anymore because I would typically just do work until rush hour ended and then
Mm.
drive home. And then the next morning started again at 6:37. Yeah, it was really hard.
How long did you do this for?
Well, until it was funny because Jonathan, my older son, found a job at Young and Bloor, and he was commuting in with me. And after a week, he said, "I don't know how you do this commute. I can't do it. I'm finding a place." And
Yeah.
at that point, I thought, well, okay, well, you know what? If why don't we get a place together? We'll
Yeah.
get a 2 bedroom, right? And if I could stay Monday through Thursday, you could stay the rest of the week. And so we ended up doing that. And so that's how I ended up. We started out
Mm.
renting, and then we thought, no, you know what? It's crazy paying the rents we were paying. Let's get a condo. So we bought a condo, and yeah, that was it.
Smart move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it worked
Wow.
out. It worked out
Holy
really
cow.
well.
People always think, oh, VP, CEO, I want to get to that level of payment, of compensation, of benefits, of travel, let's say, or whatever is the situation. But I don't think people understand always the grandiose work that
It's a lot of
comes
work.
with
Yeah.
it. And is it a lot of emails?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of emails. I mean, especially when you're dealing with a big sort of like I had GTA region, right? A lot of areas of law, all the areas of law. And I had, again, 17 independent community legal clinics plus 5 ethno linguistic
Yeah.
clinics. So there were It was busy. Yeah, there was a lot going on all the time. And it wasn't so much emails, it was meetings. Like
Oh,
literally,
interesting.
oh, my meetings would go 9 to 5, like
Now,
every hour.
are they as productive as we think they are? Because the
They
joke, at
are,
least.
they are,
Okay.
they are, yeah. And don't forget, because there was just so many different areas that I was involved in, they were not all the same topic, right? So, of course, there was the executive. So we would meet every Monday morning and we'd basically, we call it stand up, where we would talk about what we were doing to further the aims of our responsibilities in our area, in our sector. And then we would meet as an executive, and then we would meet for various substantive areas. So, but again, everything like there weren't enough hours in the day to have meetings, to be honest with you. But yeah, it was full of meetings. And that's what precluded me from working on my emails because I was always in these meetings. And then we had emails coming in all the time,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, okay, I have to get to these emails, but it'll have to be after hours when I don't have meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need to find a better system in corporate America to alleviate that, because I'm in the same boat where I have meetings and it's productive, but then there's other people emailing and
Exactly.
urgency comes in and
Exactly.
this needs to be due tomorrow, and that means 9 o'clock is when I start to open them. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
what was your favorite part of your day? Because VP was the main.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite part of being of the day of being a VP? Was it meeting with people and talking to them? Was it meeting with cases? What
I
was?
think it was everything, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I really enjoyed the role.
Okay.
We met, I met with, we just, you're working with a higher caliber of talent in many respects. Like everyone who's reporting to you are at sort of a director level. So everyone knows their stuff, right? And because we were sort of, when you're in sort of a VP, when you're looking at strategic development and when you're talking strategy and you're talking about how can we when you're evaluating current services and you're thinking, is there a better way we can conduct ourselves? Is there a better service delivery model that we can adopt? It's sort of in that sort of thinking zone, in that creative zone. And when you have people who have have talent, experience, knowledge, who are like extremely competent,
Mm,
it gives you that thrill. Like it's thrilling. It's
yeah.
thrilling to just to hear it and to move
Mm,
on and to hear different perspectives. There's nothing like it. It's really good.
interesting. Is it because you're almost choosing? You're the captain of the ship. You're kind of telling a little bit where to go, as opposed
Exactly.
to pulling up and down the sails.
Right, exactly. So you're basically saying to someone, I would like to think about. So one of the things that I did at Legal Aid Ontario, because we had significant cuts in our family law service area, certificate area, was I basically developed family law service centers throughout my region. So we established one per uh, beside each court, where we had full staff model where they could provide full representation. So it went beyond their duty counsel program, where there was just day representation. So it's like, so, okay, and so I had my director of family law services and I had other really talented lawyers come in and say, okay, how can we pull this off? And because we had so many domestic violence victims, how do we create a more integrated wraparound service? So let's talk about how do we integrate social work services
Mhm.
within our legal service, right? So it was really interesting just to come up with some of those ideas. And you take the
Mm,
best ideas and you basically sort of flesh them out and you see and you solution them and you try to determine, will this work, right? And then, of course, you want to sort of develop a business plan for it, you
mm.
need a budget for it, and then you have to. So you've got all these different parts of the organization who are working with you to come up with this plan, with this project plan.
Mhm.
And then and then if it's bought, if it's accepted, and if it's approved, it's super exciting
Yeah, it's
because,
rewarding.
well, it is because you're looking at something different.
Yeah. So is it the ideation and the planning that is kind of the main
Well,
job?
yeah, well, it is. And when you're at a VP level, I think it is. I think a lot of it, but it's also oversight. So if something
Mm,
goes wrong, it's like, well,
they
okay,
point to
well,
you.
buck stops here.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what do I do about this? How do I resolve this? Or what do we say to the public? so that,
What skills do you need to get there? Like, you were chosen, right?
yes.
What skills do you have that you think got you to that
Well,
level?
I think there are a number. I think you've got to have that well-rounded sort of personality. You've got to have, number one, you've got to know your area, right? So you've got to be competent in your area. I think you have to be professional in your approach. I think you need good stakeholder relations. Yeah, I think you need strong communication skills, right? And I think there's really a whole sort of package that sort of comes with that. I think it's like, so to what extent are you a forward moving, or are you a strategic thinker too? So I think there's also that assessment too.
Interesting. Now, one last question for you, or two more. I have one more about the position. What was the worst part? And if you feel comfortable saying, what was the worst part of your day? What did you dread looking at? Was it emails?
No, I don't mind emails. Actually,
Oh, interesting.
no,
Okay.
no, I don't mind emails. I would just say the worst part was, there were just so many meetings, and there was, you wanted to be prepared for each of those meetings, and there was never enough time in the day
To prepare.
and to read through, a lot of material, and to, I think there just comes a point where you basically, have to sort of admit defeat. It's like, so, you know what, sorry, I had other priorities, and I just didn't have time to do this, and can we postpone this meeting by a day or two so I can become acquainted with the material, so I can participate. So I think you have to sort of learn your own limitations, but I think it's also very hard to make the admission that I'm not ready to go.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be true to yourself, and you basically just have to say, sorry, folks, I know that, you put a lot of work into this, but I had a lot on my plate this week, right?
I think that's what makes you great, though. And you got to that position is you're adaptive. Being able to say, hey, I'm not able to, give my best self to this meeting right now.
Yeah, so I think that was really sort of the worst feeling that would come up. And it didn't happen very often because, again, I had a downtown condo, and I would work until like 9 at night to
it
be
work.
prepared. So you'd make it work, but there were times where the materials were just so voluminous. It's like, you know what, guys, thanks for all this work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay. And the last thing I like to leave off on this, on the episodes is, what advice would you give? I know we kind of already touched on it, but if you were to give a statement, what advice would you give to young people based on what your life experiences and trials and tribulations and lessons?
Yeah, I would say, like as I have sort of said all along, and that is, I think it's important to take chances because you never know where that opportunity will lead. And if it doesn't work out, don't beat yourself over it. Just consider, lessons learned, and you know what you like and you know what you don't like, right? But don't feel trapped. I mean, don't get trapped into something that you don't really want to do for the rest of your life. Be true to yourself. I think that's really the only thing I can say.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.